Hey everyone, what is up? This is Ete with another episode of Eco Lawn Science. And today I'm excited. I've got a special guest with me. He's a certified arborist. He's an entrepreneur of many years and has got so much experience and knowledge in his brain. I hope we get to hear a little bit of that today. And he's also been one of my best friends for the last 20 plus years. And so I'm excited to have him. He's going to be calling in from Houston, Texas. His name is John Walters. John, can you say hi?
How are you, everybody?
How's the weather down there, John?
It's great. It's 58 degrees and raining. So I know that doesn't sound great, but compared to where you're sitting, it's probably a step up, right?
Yeah. So one thing about John, he likes to rub things in. So,
but I'm real quiet in July.
Yeah. You can't. Yeah, it flips in July. Utah's definitely better. So I've asked John to come on the show. Let me give you a little bit of an introduction about him and why he's here today. So John, like I said, he's been an entrepreneur. He's been in the service industry for quite a while. He's self-taught, didn't have the college diploma, didn't go to business school, has found a way to wrap his head around the service industry businesses. We're talking about pest control, lawn fertilization, lawn mowing, tree care, all these, and he's had many companies. I actually don't know how many, but he likes to do the hard part. He likes to move to an area, do all the hard work, start them up, and then once it gets to a point where it's starting to take off pretty good, he generally sells it and moves on. How's that sound, John?
That sounds about right. I don't know why that is, but somebody once told me I have career ADD, and maybe that's true, but I just like there's something fun about putting things together and building it. But, it's like a Lego, right? You build a Lego setup and then but playing with it just sounds really boring, right? The fun is in the building. To me, that's how I look at it. But, you said self-taught, and I just want to say something real quick on that. I am. And there's advantages to that, but I like what you did too. You know what I mean? You learned from the people around you, and you got yourself a little more experience than I did, or experience in areas I didn't, and that has really helped you a lot. So don't be completely self-taught. Don't be afraid to go and work for somebody. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, I've never worked for anybody in this industry, and so that helps me a lot. But I think you working for a few other larger companies has really helped you a lot.
Awesome. So there we go.
I encourage that.
So there we go. Don't just be self-taught. Learn from those around you. So real quick, let me ask you this, John. How long have you been in the service industry? Has it been over 20 years at least?
Oh, it's been 31, I think. 1988, I think it was. I bought a lawn cutting business back in South Jersey. I think that's what it was. 1988, I got into it, and it worked great. I loved it. You know what I mean? At the end of the year, I had a pile of cash in the drawer, and I made more money than I'd ever made. I worked harder than I'd ever worked, but it was good. It was great, and it gave me this, for the first time in my life. I think prior to that, I was in printing, and in the course of about 6 years, I had something like 24 different jobs. Now I never got fired from them. I wasn't a goof off or anything. I just got bored at every one, and I kept looking for that happy place. Well, running from shop to shop, looking for a place that I'd be happy, but it really wasn't the places I was running from. It was working for someone else that I was running from, but I didn't figure that out till later.
Yeah, and I know you're not the only one, and and I know I'm sure there's a lot of listeners right now that are checking in and they're going, oh, I can relate to what he's saying, spending their whole lives behind a desk. But there are ups and downs, like you said. You made more money than you ever did, but you worked harder than you ever did. And so being an entrepreneur is not it's not for the weak-hearted, would you say?
It's not. I mean, you have to, Harold and I, and you always have this conversation. It's like, you really only need to have one thing to be self-employed. And that is, you have to be willing to do whatever it takes. That's it. You just have to be willing to do whatever it takes. So that means if you're heading home for dinner and it's 5 o'clock and one of your clients calls and they're having a problem with this, or depending on what service you're in, okay, dinner's off. I'm going to miss a soccer game. I got to go do it. I mean, it's just what you have to do, at least in the beginning, until you get up and running and you have other people in those places for you. But you have to be willing to do whatever it takes.
Awesome. And there's a book out there for anyone who's listening. It's by Angela Duckworth, and the book is called Grit. And I talk about this book a lot, but she did a similar study to Ivy League graduates and found out after, I forget, it was 10 or 20 years, the ones that actually succeeded in entrepreneurship were the ones who had grit, the ones that could get back after getting knocked down, get back up every time. So I would agree. So guys, there's a lot we could talk with John about, but for today's episode, the reason I want to have him on Eco-Lawn Science is because we want to talk about trees. We want to talk about tree healthcare. And among all the things that John does and is specialized and is an expert at over the 30 plus years, trees is one that I think he's just been fascinated with. And about a week or two ago, we were having a conversation, and here's one thing I love. John knows quite a bit. He loves the science. He loves to know how things work. And we were talking, and here he is 30 plus years in the industry, and he was out exploring nurseries, just trying to learn more. He's always looking to learn, and I think there's a lesson there. But can you tell us a little bit about your experience that you were sharing with me on the phone about why were you looking around at different trees, nurseries? What sparked that, and what did you learn? What did you find out?
Well, I just wanted to go out and meet a few of the guys, and because I had considered getting into the growing business. Now, unfortunately for me, I'm 57, and that's not the time you get into the nursery business. You need to get into the nursery business when you're much younger, because you're 7 years away from making money the day you buy your land, minimum. And so I just wanted to go out and kind of get an idea and see if there was any way I could maybe just learn enough that I could maybe buy an existing nursery or something like that. But as I went through the nursery, I deal with a lot of plants after they come out of the nursery and get put in the ground. So going through, the guy, I was chatting with the guy, and he's probably the best grower in Houston. At least the landscapers feel like he's the best grower. But there are reasons I think that he needs to change some things he does, and I'll get to that. But so we're going through, we're looking at the nursery, checking out. It's a beautiful nursery. Every single plant is beautifully dark green. I mean, There isn't a light shaded leaf on any tree or plant anywhere. And he grew mostly trees and ornamentals, none of the really smaller shrubs, nothing like that. I think it was like crepe myrtles and up. So I asked him, I said, well, what are you doing? I mean, man, this stuff looks great. And he said, well, I have first off, I'm sitting on 5.5 water from my well. He goes, so I get great pH out of the water. And I said, well, what's your regimen? Like, do you feed it? He goes, yeah, come on in. And we went in the office, and he showed me his regimen. And I looked at it, and I just glanced at it, and I was just kind of blown away, because I did the math real quick, and I thought, he treats these trees 60 times a year. 60 times a year, right? And this is not an organic guy. He has some great, organic soil to start with, but after that, the closest he gets to anything that's not synthetic is probably Osmocote, and I'm not sure how close that is. Everything is synthetic. So this guy is giving them miticides, insecticides, fungicides every single month, and he's rotating them. He's learned a few things. He's feeding them every 2 weeks through a fertigation system. He's putting Osmocote on them every couple months, and then he does different kinds of drenches for things that have, specific problems. So like I said, I added up, it was 60 treatments, and I thought, man, 60 treatments. You're going to take a plant that's been given 60 treatments. And the other thing he did, before I go on, every one of his trees went up, a post next to it, and it was tied in several places so that this thing would grow perfectly straight and not be knocked over by the wind or bent in any way, because that can ruin or that can lessen the value of stock when he goes to sell it to the landscaper. So you want to keep everything straight and green. So anyway, I'm looking at these things and I'm thinking, man, these trees are beautiful, and they are grown specifically for the purpose of looking great the day they get sold to the landscaper. They are not, what I figured out was that these things are not at all prepared for being thrown into the landscape, because they're going to go from that to being planted into the landscape, hopefully planted correctly. Not always, but most of the time it is. And they go into an environment now that, if they're lucky, the homeowner or landscaper who's running the irrigation is watering them 3 times a week at best. They don't feed the trees. They rarely feed shrubs. And so these plants kind of go into this shock. We always say, well, it's transplant shock. It's really not transplant shock. It's culture shock, I think is what you call it. Yeah. These things are It's like they're in intensive care in his nursery, and we've wheeled them out to the parking lot and said, good luck, and that's kind of what you get. And so I kind of realized, I said, okay, this is what I'm up against. This is what I'm dealing with. Not that there's anything wrong with what he's doing. That's a whole nother conversation. I love the guy. He is a great grower, a very knowledgeable guy. And he's doing what he has to do. And this culture runs right through the whole business, right through the whole industry and every other industry probably. He's growing for his payday. He's building his product for his payday. Every industry does that, right? So I thought, okay, I got to start changing the whole way I approach these trees. I can't go into this when they get put in the landscape. I've got to be more proactive. I've got to educate my client more. I got to let them know what these things come from. I've got to explain to them in a sentence or two that these things have been, treated 60 times and now they're going to a zero treatment program. We got to change that. So that's what I learned from the nursery the other day.
So let me ask you, so there's a couple things I want to go back to on that. The first thing I want to say is, for you guys listening, if you notice, John, did you have to pay him anything for this information?
No, not at all.
So you just asked him, and he said, "Come behind. I'll show you behind the curtain."
He showed me his clipboard with his treatment regimen. The thought crossed my mind, man, I'd love to have a picture of this, and I thought, no, that would be rude. I think there's some protocol there that you have to be respectful when somebody shares something. I don't want to push it. I don't want to be that guy. Oh, can I take a picture? And, I don't want to steal his information. I just want to get an idea of what he's doing. And so he gave me that. He took me back to his, showed me how all his irrigation works, how his fertigation system works. He actually has his own Osmocote made. I don't know who manufactures it, but he has it made, and he adds a few, and he showed me what he adds. It was basically some micros. I think there's some sulfur put in there, or I could find the bag. I could tell you what it is. A couple of little things he put in there, and he had it manufactured, and he even sold me a few bags. I said, can I take a few bags with me? Can I buy them off you? He said, sure. And he said, I can give you two. I think they were $50 a piece for a 50-pound bag. So it's very expensive stuff, but it is very, it's good. Wow. For a nurseryman, it's a good product.
So do you find in general, if you were to just walk up and ask, is that a great way to learn and get education? Are people willing to generally just share their everything with you?
For the most part, yes. Okay. When I came to Houston, and I was working in Houston, came here, 17 years ago the first time, I ran into a guy named Steve who had a company called Kingwood Green over in Kingwood, and he actually did the whole Houston area. And I just ran into him in back then what was Lesko, and he asked me what I did. He does the same thing, and he said, he goes, what you ought to do? And he said, you ought to move to a monthly IPM program instead of the treatments you're doing. And so, and that was his big secret. That's what separated him from everybody else. And he walked away, and I didn't talk to him for a while after that. We're very good friends now, but I stopped and I thought, and I go, that guy just told me what separates him from everybody else and encouraged me to embrace it. You know what I mean? So no, I've had a lot of experiences like that in my life where people share. Heck, I share everything with everybody for the most part. Every once in a while, you get this one little secret. And you go, man, maybe I should keep that, but I never do. I don't know why. When I was in pest control back there, and you can tell me to shut up if I'm talking too much, because I'll do
Keep
that
going.
Sometimes. So I'm in pest control, and I'm doing organic pest control up in Park City. I'm just trying to figure it out. And so it's a big complaint back in Utah, right? Box elder bugs, they're horrible. So I'm trying to figure these things out. And I'm realizing I spray down, these guys come out from the cracks and crevices later, they walk across this dry product. They're not grooming insects, which means they're not going to clean themselves off and ingest the pesticide and die from it. So I'm thinking, okay, and I'm kind of racking my brain, and I come up with a solution. I'm going to throw some peppermint oil in there and see if that makes a difference. It's just for fun. So I threw some peppermint oil in, and they came. What the peppermint oil did, what I learned was it agitated the daylights out of it. It just came pouring out from their hiding places, and it just wiped out the populations. I could go out and treat a house and get rid of box elder bug now. And so the first thing I did was I went to our supplier, Rob, and I said, hey, Rob, got a great solution for box elder bugs. And I told him. And I know he shared it with everybody, and I was fine with that, because I think it was like 6 months later, some guy came to me and goes, man, I just heard about this great solution for getting rid of box elder bugs. And he repeated back to me my process. You know what I mean? So I go, okay, good. But that's okay, because by sharing that, what it means is, and this is I think what we were going to talk about is the long-term thinking. It means that everybody out there now that gets this piece of information is going to use less chemical.
Yes.
You know what I mean? They're going to use less synthetics. And in the end, that's what we're all trying to do, right?
Yeah, and I love that. So there's 3 big takeaways from what you're just saying. The first thing is, do not be afraid, guys, to ask people. People want to help. I mean, and I actually learned this from John. You know, there's 2 ways to look at it. There's abundance and scarcity. And when you look at life or business with an abundance mindset, you realize there are no competitors. Because if you're friends with your competitors, there's going to be work for everyone. And if you have an abundant mindset, you will always have plenty of work. The second thing I love that you said is experimentation. Here you are trying to find a solution to kill these box elder bugs and this idea of the peppermint oil. And so I think especially in the service industry, but any entrepreneur, you're always experimenting, trying new things, failing, and then eventually you stumble onto something that works. And then the third part is he shared it because, like John said, when you share a win with other like-minded people who want to do good, you really can clean up an industry. And that's been a big focus on this show is how do we clean up the lawn care industry, the tree care? How do we educate people, clean up through education? And so awesome. I love those. So back to this nurseries. And it sounds like what I'm hearing is, yes, the trees look amazing as they leave the nursery. They're greenest and they're the best looking trees, but they're really not prepared for what they're about to experience, which is really going into a ground that is not as fertile, not as babied or looked after as they were in the nursery. And so therefore they're not really prepared for what they're about to experience. What do you think? Speak to that a little bit.
Well, you're right. They're not, and that is the problem. Now you've got trees out there that are absolutely stunning, but there's no strength to them. There's no endurance. They haven't encountered any stresses. Stresses are good for trees. They're good for all plants. You want plants to have some wind pushing them around. It's going to strengthen the cells in the trunk or the stem, and it's going to thicken that caliper so that it is more proportionally sized. The caliper has to be able to hold, it has to be proportionate to the height of the tree. And these trees, when they're tied up and don't encounter wind, they end up being too thin for their height, if that makes any sense. Okay, that's one of the things you run into. So now you got trees out there that really have to be watched as they adapt. Now the trees will adapt. They'll adjust. That's what they do. That's what all life does, right? Because nothing wants to die. Everything wants to live. And so they're gonna grow and change. And as they encounter wind, their calipers are going to strengthen. But there's a period where you just have to help them through that. Same with feeding, like you said, they're getting thrown into ground. It's essentially, down here we have just clay. And when I say clay, what I really mean is concrete. It's like wet concrete. It's just, there's nothing in it. There's no oxygen. It's as compact as it can get. And it's horrible soil, but everything seems to thrive down here anyway. Everything does. But they're going into that after they've been fed, 24, maybe 28 times in the course of a year. Now, I'm hoping that the homeowner hires me or someone else to feed them at least twice a year. So there's something in that soil that they can grow, that they can grow from. But anyway, that's kind of what I found. The other thing trees need is they need some insects. They really do. I hate sterilizing a landscape environment because you need some insect problems out there. It's good. That's how the trees develop their resistance. When you there's a good book out. It's called What a Tree Knows, I think, and a lady, I used to do walkthroughs at Sundance. It was actually Redford's wife, Billy. She turned me onto the book, believe it or not. Very, very, very neat lady. But anyway, she turned me onto the book. And it talks about how, you get out into the plains of, say, Africa, and a giraffe will come and they'll start eating whatever tree they eat out there. They'll start eating from the one side. Something triggers in that tree. It chemically speaks to the other side of the tree, releases a chemical, and now those leaves are more bitter. That's why when a giraffe or anything that comes along feeds on leaves of a tree, it eats a little bit and then it moves on, because the change of that tree has learned how to change its taste or the flavor of its leaves instantly to protect itself. Things like that are not learned in a nursery, because a nursery is essentially a bubble.
Wow. So just like, humans, we need opposition. We need trials and difficulties to make us strong, to make us become something of value. Let's follow this out then. So the trees are raised in this environment, and really, I love your comparison to what you called what'd you say, the snowflake generation? Is that what they call it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's they call them the snowflakes, right? And we, like I said, I think they're going. I look back and I go, well, whose fault is it that we have snowflakes and kids unprepared? It's ours.
Exactly.
It's the parents' fault.
So good. That's a good a way to picture this. So now the tree. Take me where the tree goes. So let's say a landscaper or a developer, someone comes in and buys the trees from this farm, and then takes them to a homeowner's property, a homeowner that might be listening right now. I want to just follow this picture. So I'm thinking of a tree coming out of a beautiful, environment. Everything's been handed to them, and now it's going in. And you're saying it gets maybe treated a couple times a year if you even have a tree company, right?
Yeah, if you're lucky. I mean, tree services are not as popular. When I go to an area, I find that I can get a lawn service up and running year one. Same with pest through aggressive sales. But trees, it doesn't work that way. It'll take you 3-4 years to start a tree company and get it to where you're paying the bills, unless you're in pruning and removal, which is just pure labor. But so the tree comes out and it goes into the landscape. Now it's in a landscape where it's hopefully being watered properly. So if it's being watered, at least for the initial first month it's in the ground, they're probably going to water it every day or pretty close to that. So it tries to get some roots established, a little more roots established. Because remember, these roots have been contained, especially down here. Up there, they weren't contained. They were spaded, so they were cut. So you've got a much smaller root system, goes in the ground. Now we need to grow that out. So they're gonna plop it in the ground. You don't have a lot of nutrients in the soil here or there, and so it's got to struggle. I don't even know that the tree knows where to begin. First thing it's going to do is start to grow roots. Try to grow roots. Okay, that's its initial reaction. Its instinct starts to grow roots. If the homeowner's watering enough, like we said, then we're good. 9 times out of 10, that's all the tree has, and it has a few other stressors. One, it's going to have some wind and environmental factors that it didn't have to deal with in the nursery. Okay, and 2, it's got competition now. So now it's in a place that it's in a bed and it's got shrubs all around it. Well, it's got to compete with those shrubs for the nutrients and the moisture. If it's planted on a lawn, even if it's in a little bed on the lawn, people make a little round bed, put a tree in it. It still has to compete now with the turf. And as you know, turf sucks everything up. Yeah. I mean, not a whole lot. If it's going through the turf and the turf has room, or it will grab it. That root system will suck it up. And so whatever gets past that now gets down to the tree roots, which stay just below the turf, probably 4 to 18 inches, somewhere in that range. 6 to 18 inch depth is where your tree roots are. So, how much gets down there? Not a whole lot. So it's got a lot of things to adapt to in a very short period of time.
So how long, because you did mention that, and I think it's incredible that a tree can adapt, that it can go from that, and over time, just like a human being, it can figure it out and get thicker skin, and really survive the winds. Does it range the time? Could some trees adapt over one season? Does it take 5 seasons? Is there any sign or any patterns to it?
No, I think a tree is always adapting. I think the initial period is going to be 1 year. Like that's generally what we follow in the industry. So when somebody puts a tree in the ground and they say, oh, I just had trees installed. And some people are proactive and they'll call me up and say, hey, I just had trees put in. Can you come feed them? No, I don't want to feed them the first year. We don't want to feed them. We don't want to stress, because that's just going to put more stress on them. So just let it adapt. You know what I mean? But it takes about a year for it to just kind of get on its feet. And then you can start it on some kind of program of feeding. Now, it doesn't mean there's nothing you can do as far as nutrients go when you put it in the soil. There's things you can do, but we'll come back to that later. So to answer your question, I'd say about a year is the initial adjustment period for a tree, but it's probably going to adapt it's going to be an adjustment phase for, 3 to 5 years, depending on a lot of the factors, the variables in the equation. Soil type, climate, where it is in its little microenvironment. Is it up against the house, in the shades, getting enough sun? All those things factor into that answer.
Okay, so let me ask you this real quick. Let's say you get the tree in, and this is kind of skipping ahead, but when do you know if a tree is like beyond repair? For homeowners listening, they're looking out, maybe their trees are yellowing, they're wilting. How do they know it's beyond repair? Is there a way for them?
Well, depending on the problem, usually the simplest test is just go out to a branch or twig and just bend it. If it bends and bounces back, you still have live cell tissue in there. If it snaps, it's dead. And cell tissue does not come back from the dead. So if you've got a branch that snaps and you go around and all the branches are snapping, there's a pretty good chance that tree's dead. Or there's something, maybe, here's the problem with trees, right, is they're bigger than we are. So when you go out and you snap the lower branches, they're all snapping. Well, you could go up to the next tier of branches and they bend. And the problem may just be working its way up the tree, and there's still time to turn it around. So I guess the answer to that is get somebody to look at it. Now, I'm not saying you have to hire an arborist. It's a good idea, but you don't have to. You can usually get someone from the extension service, whatever state, county you live in. There's almost always an extension service guy that'll come out, look at it, and give you his assessment of it. Some of those guys are really sharp. Some of those guys are just starting out, and they're learning too. So, and that's okay. You know what I mean? But anyway, yeah. I don't know if that.
Yeah, that's perfect. So my last question on this kind of topic before we shift gears here is, so going back to this idea, so do you think it makes more sense then to raise a tree or grow a tree in a more natural environment, less human addition? I don't know how to say it, but what do you think on that? Like, so this type of tree farm versus a tree farm or nursery that's very minimalistic, natural approach and let the tree get stronger. What do you think?
Yeah, I like that much better. Now you're going to have it's not going to be as aesthetically pleasing when you put it in that tree. It's going to, it's going to be off shape a little bit, maybe a little bit weak in color. But obviously your strongest oak tree you could ever grow is the one where you put the acorn in the ground where you want it. That's going to be your best case scenario. Well, that's not something we can do, because when people build a house, they need to put trees in. They want to put trees in. Well, they need to put trees in. And they can't do that with, you can't obviously go around planting acorns and maple leaf seeds and, and waiting 10 years for all that to happen. So, so you've tried to find a nursery, and a homeowner can do this. You can go out and pick your plants. Whoever your landscaper is, you say, well, where are you getting the plants from? You can go out and you can go to that nursery and say, I'm so-and-so, or the landscaper can set it up. I've done this before. And you just go pick your plants. You go and you tag them. You say, this is 101. This is 101. You pick the ones that you like, the ones that work best for you.
Awesome. So we're going to shift gears. I just got a couple more questions for you. I know you got a busy day with the rain, probably catching up on paperwork here. What would you say to landscapers or people who are buying these trees, whatever farm they're from, however they were raised, as far as just the installation process? Do you have any words of advice to help them on that?
That's one, depending on the size of the project. I have a client down here that actually bought some land up in Park City, and they're going to build up behind Jeremy somewhere. And so one of the things I said to them, first thing, because she said, what can you tell us? She said, here's what you do. You get an arborist involved. You don't have to bring them into the point where they're running the show or doing anything like that. But if most arborists are going to charge about $150 for a 1-hour consultation. In an hour, he can walk around your property and tell you what he thinks. If you say you get him for 2 hours, have him go over your plans, your landscape architect, the plans that the architect drew up. Look at where things are going. That's the first thing I'd say, because that little bit of investment right there is going to save you a whole lot of money down the line. You're going to find that you have, and the third thing he can do, if you decide you want the arborist to do this, they can sign off on the trees to make sure they're planted properly, because that's a big issue too, and we can come back to that. But anyway, that's the first thing I would do. The other thing I would do is look at it yourself. I mean, look at things, okay? Think when you're looking at your landscape and you see the pictures of it, and you go, okay, this is what's going to look like. Awesome. Go to the next step. What's it going to look like in 5 years? What's it going to look like in 10 years, 20 years? Okay, think a little further out than right after the install, because the landscaper in all likelihood is not. They like the nurserymen. They have to, and I don't fault them. They have to. That place has to look great the day you pay them. It does. It's what they're selling you. They're selling you a great looking landscape the day you write them a check. You know what I mean? Just like the nurserymen. Okay, so think a little further out and say, okay, wait a second. You know what? This tree looks awesome right here. but how's it going to look in 5 years? Well, 5 years or 10 years, this tree's going to be banging into the top of the house. The branch is going to be pushing through. Everybody can tell you a story about, having trees planted too close to the house. Looks great on the installation day. It does nothing but cause you problems down the line. So look a little further out is what I'll do.
Awesome. And I love that. And we're not trying to discourage you landscapers. We're just trying to offer some advice. So one last question on that. What would you say, and thank you for that, what would you say to our homeowners who are listening who maybe aren't using a landscaper, or just could you give just a basic maintenance, and you kind of already have, but just a little tip for the homeowners?
The other thing that I would do is try to look around and see what's doing well in your area before you even make the plan. So what does well in your area? It's nice to have a maple tree, down in Houston, but they don't do so well. People brought in these Italian cypresses here, and they're great trees in Italy and Southern California. Moab, St. George has them. They're beautiful, but put them in a hot, humid place like Houston, nothing but problems. Look around and see what's growing. See what's doing well. Drive around a few streets, see what you like. You know what I mean? Say, okay, this is I really like that tree. What kind of tree is that? That kind of thing. And they have apps now where you can just go up and take a picture of the tree, and it'll tell you what it is. You don't even have to go. You don't have to hire anybody to go with you. So that's the first thing I would do. The second thing is just I don't want to say learn a lot. It's like anything else that we do ourselves in life. You have to figure it out. I have a pool in the backyard, and it was making a funny noise. The filter was making a funny noise, and unfortunately, I don't know how a pool works, so I couldn't do anything. So I had to shut it down and tell the pool guy, hey, by God, it's making a funny noise. Do it. In time, because we just got this house, but in time, I'll start learning how that pool works so that I can take care of it better, and I'm more mindful when I hear sounds. I can do what needs to be done. Same thing on the trees in your landscape, right? Just learn a little bit about it. Learn a little bit about what's going on there. Don't bring in exotics. I mean, honestly, they're trying to establish the giant sequoia down in the Salt Lake Valley, and that's a wonderful tree, but it likes a lot of moisture. It doesn't like dry air, and so it has a lot of problems there. Don't do that. Look around what's in your area and try to stick to that. Be as native as you can.
I was actually on the Channel 2 Salt Lake News a few weeks ago because people about 10 years started planting this myrtle spurge all in their yards and their landscapes, and it's a noxious weed, right? And it's taking over everything, and they're asking me about it, and I'm thinking, well, where did you get that plant, So keep it local. Use native things. Kind of in winding down, I think this is a theme that I'm really picking up from this interview is learning and education. And that's one thing, as we're talking with John Walters, certified arborist, it's all about learning and education. The more you can learn and educate, you can empower yourself, you can pick the right trees from the right places, or do whatever you're doing, you can do it right. My last question for you, John, is I have always noticed about you, 30 plus years in the service industry, and you have never stopped learning. Every time I call him or check in, he's reading an article, he's researching something. Can you speak a little bit about the importance to other landscape or service professionals about always be involved in learning? Obviously yes, but I don't know why I do it. Honestly, it's like one of those things. It's like, oh, good, it's going to rain tomorrow. I can stay home and read. Like, I look forward to that. Not that I don't want to go out and do the work and be in the truck, because I love being in the truck. But I love it. Like you and I, we love different areas of the service industry. We do. Everybody has their thing. Mine just happens to be the plant. I just love reading about the plant. When it comes to business areas, I don't read a lot of business books. I should, but I don't. You know what I mean? And I should read more than I do, but I just focus on that. It's just where my passion is. When you have a house and you're a homeowner, that home, it's where your family grows up, and it's where everything happens. It's where the memories are created. So yeah, you're going to start learning. I think you're going to start having the desire to learn about everything in that house, whether it's the pool or the trees or how the hot water system works, whatever. You know what I mean? So, but I just naturally have an interest in it. But that said, you get a lot of guys that come into any business. I'm not going to pick on ours, but they'll go into the business. They'll figure out a way to do it, and then they just kind of rubber stamp
stamp that as long as they can until that doesn't work anymore, and then they'll make an adjustment to get it to work. But they never really dive into what they're doing. They never really immerse themselves into it. You know what I mean? They don't, because I think they lack. I think they don't truly love what they do. You know what I mean? I think you got to really love what you do to really want to learn about it. For a homeowner, you're going to go outside and you watch this tree grow. Now, in the beginning, it might be a bit of a chore, doing some homework on it. But as you watch that thing grow and flourish, and maybe this is where you get these guys in the neighborhoods, right? Now you start looking better than your neighbors, and you're going, yeah, you know what I mean? Then you start doing more homework and more, because, and I guess, because there's a guy like that on every block, right? His yard's perfect, and he does it himself. And you go, yeah, that guy, he learned. You just kind of develop a love for something you put some time into. You know what I mean? You just do. Awesome.
Thanks, man. So there you have it. There's John Walters, certified arborist out of Houston, Texas. I hope you guys have learned something today. I hope, if anything, it's just sparked your mind and your thoughts of how important it is and how alive these trees, how alive, the biology, what's going on in your yard. There's so many elements to it. Start paying attention, start learning about it, educate yourself, and you can have more success. So I hope that at least anything we've touched on that and kind of open your minds a little bit. Again, contact info will be in the show notes. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and thank you so much, and have a great day.